Welcome to the Alaska Weather Show. I'm meteorologist Peter Chan, coming to you from the National Weather Service on this Friday the 13th, 2021. And as always, if you'd like additional weather information, you can go to weather.gov/Alaska, and there's all sorts of information to find there. Also, if you wish to pass along any interesting reports or photos, you can reach me at peter.chan@noaa.gov. In the weather headlines for this late Friday afternoon and evening, flood warnings remain in effect in portions of the southeast panhandle. Up there in the north, the Taya River up around Skagway, there is a flood warning in effect, as well as for the Mendenhall Valley, including Mendenhall River and Lake. Those will persist into the early mid-afternoon hours of Saturday, and there are some flood advisories still around Yakutat, as well as near Juneau, including Montana and Jordan Creeks. Now, rainfall amounts have been in excess of 7.5 inches of Yakutat over the past 2 days with this particular system, near 7 inches at Pelican, and over 3 inches in Juneau. In fact, Juneau picked up 1.5 inches of rainfall earlier today in just a 6-hour period. But the rains will be winding down and diminishing across the panhandle to become more scattered, lighter showers here as we head through the day Saturday. Out to the west, we have an elevated surf situation along the south and west coast of the Seward Peninsula over the weekend. As a cold front approaches from the northwest, we're going to see southwest winds pick up and be rather sustained around 25 to as high as 35 miles an hour, so that'll cause surf levels to be running about 1 to 2 feet above normal high tide. And then look at the extended forecast for much of the state here through next week and into next weekend. Continued cool and occasionally wet. Well, here are the current advisories, watches, and warnings. A flood watch still in effect for Sitka on up there into the northern areas of the Panhandle. You can see the warning there for Skagway area, including the Taya River, and then also Juneau. The Juneau locator dot covers that small area of the Mendenhall Valley, as well as Montana and Jordan Creeks, and then a little advisory remains in effect in the vicinity of Yakutat. But as I said, conditions will be improving as we head through the overnight, and especially by the time we get into Saturday, later morning and afternoon. And you can see in the satellite imagery the enhanced cloud cover moving up from the Panhandle on up into northwest Canada. A couple of curls there in the cloud, indicative of the low pressure circulations, especially at the mid-levels. And this feature is what brought the heavy rain, especially from the northeast Gulf Coast on into the Panhandle. Last of at least the steadier rains will be moving through the Panhandle here as we head through the overnight, and improving conditions here for the day on Saturday. Now back to the northwest, you'll see extensive cloud cover back up toward the Chukchi Sea and out in the eastern Russia, and it's pushing off toward the southeast from northwest to southeast. Southwest winds ahead of a cold front and trough are going to be picking up there across the Seward Peninsula on up into the northwest coast. And with winds sustained up around 30 miles an hour for a prolonged period, that's going to cause those elevated surfs there on the west and southern coasts of the Seward Peninsula, including the Nome area. And then further on off toward the southwest there, we have weak ridge of high pressure out over the central eastern Aleutians. But the main weather feature today is low pressure that extends there from areas of along the northern Gulf Coast on up into northwest Canada. Trailing trough will continue to feed bands of rain, though not as heavy as what they have been the past day or two, into portions of the Panhandle. And if you look further off toward the north and west, you can see that cold front working its way across eastern Russia, with an area of low pressure southwest of the central and western Aleutians. Overnight, low pressure will just continue to weaken across the Gulf, and we will see the rains beginning to diminish there in the southeast, whereas weak high pressure remains entrenched over the eastern Aleutians back to north of the central and western Aleutians, and the cold front makes slow progress toward the south and east, with areas of rain there in the lower Chukchi Sea and the Bering Strait. And then finally, Saturday, that cold front will be approaching the northwest coast with some stronger winds up into Norton Sound and across the Seward Peninsula. And we'll see the low out in the Gulf just kind of spinning and weakening, but still some areas of lighter rain or scattered lighter showers there across the southeast. And into Sunday, drier conditions will develop across south central areas for the change, including the Kenai and the Anchorage areas. and then that frontal system kind of weakening as it works its way in toward the interior west central areas and northwest with some precipitation with it. Lows will generally be in the low mid 50s across the inner waterways of the southeast Saturday morning. Lows upper 40s to around 50 degrees across south central areas. Still rather cloudy, though a few breaks possible there in the southeast panhandle with highs at best lower 60s. But if we get a little bit of sun, temperature should get back up, could get up into the mid 60s there, Anchorage on up toward Talkeetna. Otherwise, lows temperatures Sunday morning will be back down most areas, upper 40s to lower 50s, and then high temperatures on Sunday, still only around or a little above 60 there in the southeast, but getting back up into the mid 60s across south central areas with some periods of sunshine, looking like to be the nicest day of the weekend. Arctic coast lows will be in the upper 30s, 40s elsewhere, and then high temperatures on Saturday, generally 40s and 50s, but a few lower 60s, the normal warm spots along the Alcan border on up toward Fort Yukon. And Sunday morning lows, upper 30s along the Arctic coast, generally low mid 40s elsewhere, and with high temperatures confined to the 40s in the northwest and western Seward Peninsula, 50s up through the Yukon Valley. And looking at the southwest, we have low temperatures Saturday morning, generally around or into the lower 40s. Mid upper 40s out across the Alaska Peninsula into the Aleutian chain. And Saturday afternoon we'll see temperatures generally in the 50s across the interior, 58 degrees there at Bethel. And as we head on down toward the tip of the Alaska Peninsula, upper 50s as well. And low temperatures Sunday morning area wide will generally be in the upper 40s to near 50 degrees. With high temperatures Sunday afternoon getting back up in most areas into the 50s, even some readings up around 60 going down the length of the Alaska Peninsula. And as we take a quick look at the temperature outlook, the 6 to 10 day temperature outlook from Thursday, August 19th through Monday, August 23rd, so that's next weekend. Below normal temperatures are anticipated across west central areas of the state. Much of the state, though, temperatures are going to be near or a bit below normal. Precipitation-wise, we should see some drier conditions develop across the southern part of the state. The south central areas in through the southwest have the best chance of seeing below normal precipitation for a change, with near to above normal precipitation the northern half of the state, with the focus there more on the northwest coast and the western Brooks Range. So again, this pattern will be cool, continued cool, and occasionally wet as we head it through the mid-month and in toward the latter part of August.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Hangar Flying. My name is Mary O'Connor, and I'm with the Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation. This evening, I have with me Tom George, who is the Alaska representative of the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association. Hi, Tom.
Good evening, Mary. Pleasure to be with you.
Tom, we understand that there are some charting changes taking place for one of the well-known passes that's used by pilots in Alaska. Can you give us an overview of this pass and its location?
I'd be happy to. The route we're talking about is the route from Anchorage to McGrath across a section of the Alaska Range. And while if the weather in our aircraft is up to just getting up to altitude and going straight across, that's the most efficient way to do it. But if either weather or aircraft capability or the reason we're making the trip keeps us lower, we've got to find a route through the Alaska Range to make this flight. And I'd like to provide some definitions to help with this discussion. And I've not been able to find a true aviation mountain pass definition, but I did find this from World Landforms. Mountain pass is the highest portion of a path through the mountain range. The highest portion of the route is also the lowest route that can be traveled between mountains on either side. So we both have the pass giving us the high point, but it is part of a route to get us through a set of mountains or hills terrain. What the FAA provides is a mountain pass chart symbol that tells us where that high point is, but it doesn't tell us anything about the actual route itself.
Thank you for that definition and clarification of those terms. Now that we know exactly what we're talking about, can you show us the routes that we're going to be addressing?
So to zoom in on the central Alaska range a little bit more, the orange route that we're seeing here would take you through Rainy Pass, which is the higher route, and also through more precipitous terrain. So there is an alternate route through Ptarmigan Pass, and that's where we're going to see the changes to the names if people are looking to fly that route. And let me give you a little more background on the history of that. This is a document from the 1930s, 1934, that talked about flying through the Alaska Range. And this is what they had to say about Rainy Pass. The backbone of the Alaska Range is reached at Rainy Pass, which is of moderate elevation, very narrow with many sharp turns, and should never be flown on account of violent downdrafts and the fact that if cloudiness is encountered in the pass, it is impossible to turn around. They also went on to talk about the alternative route, known as Ptarmigan Pass, with a U shape to the south of the airway, 2 to 3 miles wide with no sharp turns so that it could be flown safely when ceilings are below the summit of the mountains and still be possible to turn airplanes around in the pass if necessary. So these are both very long passes of very long standing, and that advice about Rainy Pass probably was pretty good advice given the nature of the aircraft that they were flying in those days.
This historical perspective is fascinating, and it is interesting to know that these passes have been used and documented for a long time. So our beloved Ptarmigan Pass is the one that's being renamed and re-identified on the chart. Can you show us what these changes are going to look like on the charts and what pilots should expect to see?
I'd be happy to. The magic date is August the 12th, 2021. And before that time, the chart, as it's actually run today, still shows Rainy Pass as it always has, no change there. The location that historically was called Ptarmigan Pass has been changed to Hell's Gate by the FAA, since that's the actual official place name for that location. What's not on the chart at all is the actual mountain pass, the high point along the route, which is shown with the orange star here. So after August 12th, what we're going to see is Houston Pass, which is the proper USGS name of that location, depicted on the sectionals, on the McGrath sectional, and Hell's Gate will remain on the charts, but as a VFR checkpoint to allow pilots to have some reference as they're flying through that area.
This is very helpful. With a VFR checkpoint, pilots can also increase their situational awareness and use this point to communicate with other pilots. So both of these passes, Rainy and Houston, will get pilots through the Alaska Range. How do these routes differ, and is there a reason why pilots might prefer to use one over the other?
Well, going back to look at the trace of these routes now on a Google Earth background so we can look at terrain rather than just topography. The orange route, again, is the route through Rainy Pass, and the actual elevation of Rainy Pass is 3,524 feet. This is not going to be, these elevations won't be on the charts originally, but before the end of the year, FAA is telling us that they're going to add the actual pass elevation not only to these, but many other passes in the state of Alaska. In contrast, Houston Pass, the elevation is 2,749, and what was shown as Ptarmigan Pass, now Hell's Gate Canyon, is 2,200 feet approximately. So the difference between Rainy and Houston is 775 feet in terms of vertical elevation, another 550 feet difference between Hell's Gate Canyon and the Houston Pass. So knowing those values when you're flight planning and as you're starting to fly these routes is very useful information, so that if you're encountering ceilings before you get to the pass that aren't going to let you get through the pass, you've got an early indication that this might be a good time to turn around and exercise plan B. So yeah, I think in this case, we've got some new place names to become familiar with. And as you mentioned, not only is it useful for knowing about these in terms of our strategic tackling of these routes, but also we need to use these place names as we're making CTAF calls to reduce the risk of mid-air collision while we're flying in this confined terrain. So hopefully everybody will get their charts updated with this chart cycle, either paper or electronic, and use these new place names so that we're all singing off the same sheet of music as we're happily flying through either of these passes.
Tom, thank you so much for explaining these changes, and thank you for your work with the Mountain Pass Working Group. I appreciate your time being on Hangar Flying, and in addition, we'd like to thank the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association for allowing you to be here.
My pleasure.
Thanks also to Alaska Public Media for allowing us to bring you Hangar Flying, and thank you to the National Weather Service for sharing their time. Have a good evening, everyone.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Well, thank you, Tom George and Mary O'Connor, for that update on the change from Ptarmigan to Houston Pass on the FAA chart. As far as our flight weather coming up, if you do have a flight planned Saturday into Sunday, we are looking for IFR conditions lingering across the northeast Gulf Coast into portions, especially the inner waterways there of the southeast panhandle, and then back out toward the northwest with an approaching cold front. Saturday afternoon, we'll see conditions improve a bit there across the panhandle, but back through the western parts of the state. IFR conditions along the coast of the Seward Peninsula and St. Lawrence Island, as southwesterly winds pick up, and we do have some areas of precipitation moving inland. We'll see IFR conditions a little more widespread along the Brooks Range into the west interior and portions of the southwest as a result of that front bringing showers in with that. Still some areas of IFR along the interior inner waterways of the Panhandle, and by Sunday afternoon, conditions there in the Panhandle should generally improve to MVFR, with a few pockets of isolated IFR there up along the Brooks Range, and then as we get off of the west coast, Nunavik Island out into the Aleutians. So pass conditions on Saturday, Anaktuvik as well as Adigan should generally hold on to MVFR throughout the day. As we drop southwestward, Lake Clark and Merrill will start out MVFR, but should improve to VFR later in the morning and afternoon. That'll also be the case at Rainy Pass, MVFR to VFR. And we'll see Windy Pass hold on to MVFR conditions throughout Saturday, and also that's expected MVFR at Isabel. And then finally further east, Mentasta should see MVFR conditions improve to VFR conditions, the north entrance, but the south entrance is expected to hold on to MVFR conditions throughout the day. And Tanita will start out with IFR conditions in the early morning, but improving to MVFR. And overall, Portage should hold on to MVFR conditions throughout the day on Saturday, while IFR conditions linger there in the northern panhandle at Chilkoot and White. And taking a look at freezing levels across the state, we see the highest freezing levels around and above 10,000 feet to the lower half of the panhandle in the southeast. But across the western interior, they have dropped down to near and a bit below 4,000 feet, middle Yukon Valley into the southwest interior, with freezing levels below 6,000 feet out across the Alaska Peninsula, briefly coming back up to near 10,000 feet, the eastern central Aleutians. And the areas that are most favorable for some icing associated with that Gulf low, even though it's weakening, a lot of moisture has been pushed inland there into the Yukon, still lingering there across the southeast, far southeast interior and coast, so 8,000 to 16,000 feet, and out over the Gulf there between 12,000 and a flight level of 20,000 feet. As we go back toward the northwest, that cold front moving into the northwest coast, 3,000 to 13,000 feet along the northwest coast, and 7,000 to 14,000 feet, including the Bering Strait and much of the Seward Peninsula. Here are the upper level jet stream winds at 30,000 feet. Southwesterly winds coming on shore there into portions of the panhandle, upwards to 70 knots. But you can see there in the lower Gulf a wind max from the west of 150 knots. And then back toward the northwest, we have a trough with that associated surface cold front. Southwest winds upwards to 60 knots ahead of it, turning northwesterly to 80 knots behind it, dropping down to mid-levels 9,000 feet. Onshore flow strongest Hawaii on over toward the interface there between the Gulf and North Pacific, upwards to 55 knots from the southwest, and then southwesterly winds to 40 knots there up through the strait and along the northwest Gulf Coast. And as we translate that down closer to the surface, 3,000-foot winds will be strongest 35 to 40 knots from the southwest across the Seward Peninsula on up into the western Brooks Range. Could lend towards some turbulence, as we would expect with a trough and cold front moving into that region here over the course of the weekend. So we do expect some turbulence between the surface and 4,000 feet there, including St. Lawrence Island, the Seward Peninsula on up into the northwest interior, including the western half of the Brooks Range, and then also a little pocket there near the mouth of Cook Inlet and down toward Shelikof Strait between the surface and 4,000 feet. So if you do have a flight plan, as usual, make sure you check the latest conditions and forecast. And if you are heading out this weekend, I wish you a safe flight and thank you for checking in on our aviation weather segment. And make note of that change, Ptarmigan to Houston pass on the FAA charts.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back now for the marine weather segment of our show, and today's sea ice edge. A lot of open water there throughout the Chukchi Sea, and the ice that remains there along the Arctic coast continues to gradually melt. We are going to see some stronger southwest winds set up Saturday into Sunday, upwards to 30 knots, especially along the northwest coast down toward the Bering Strait, where there will be elevated surf levels along the western and southern shores of the Seward Peninsula, including Nome, Port Clarence, and Wales. We're expecting water levels to be a foot or two above normal high tide. But conditions the wind should come down a bit there as we head through the day on Sunday. But in the southeast, low pressure, the remnants of that up now up toward Prince William Sound will weaken, and with a frontal trough moving through, winds will turn more southwesterly. South winds there, inner waterways 10 to 20 knots up through Lynn Canal, waves 2 to 4 feet, and generally around 10 knots with waves 6-7 feet there for the coastal Gulf waters. And on Sunday, look for winds still to be southerly in the inner channels, Petersburg northward through Lynn Canal, waves 2 to 3 feet, but turning more northwest to west along the Gulf Coast with waves 5 to 7 feet. Saturday will be a mix of winds there, south central areas, northeasterly 15 knots, maybe 2-foot waves there, Prince William Sound, variable upper end of Cook Inlet, but down toward the south end of Cook Inlet, the mouth, up to just northeast of Kodiak, 25 to 30 knot west winds, waves 7 to 8 feet. And on Sunday, we do expect winds to be generally out of a west or southwesterly direction, 10 knots in Prince William Sound, waves 2 feet. And the highest winds again off the Kenai and there, the mouth of Cook Inlet, around 25 knots with waves of 7 to 8 feet. Across the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island, winds will generally have a westerly component on Saturday at 15 to 20 knots. Waves 4 to 6 feet across Shelikof Strait down through the North Pacific side, and 3 to 4 feet on the Bering side. And then as we look into Sunday, look for winds out of the southwest to west at 15 to 20 knots. Waves 5 to 7 feet from Shelikof Strait down through the North Pacific, and around 5 feet on the Bering side. For the eastern Aleutians, to start off Saturday, winds will be variable around 10 knots, but they do become more easterly and pick up to 20 knots once you get west of Atka as a result of low pressure that's just southwest of the central Aleutians. And waves will be as high as 7 to 8 feet from Adak on up toward Kiska and Shimia. And the low will be passing south of the central Aleutians on Sunday, with southeasterly winds ahead of it in through the eastern Aleutians around 15 knots, turning back around toward the northeast and north on the backside there west of Adak. Waves generally 6 to 8 feet on the Pacific side and 4 to 6 feet on the Bering side. And looking at the Gulf western areas there rather, the west coast, we're going to see winds picking up from the southwest upwards to 30 knots between St. Lawrence Island and Norton Sound. where waves will build to 8 to 9 feet, and again that potential for some higher surf above the normal, a foot or two above normal high tide there near Nome. Lesser winds to 20 knots from the southwest down towards St. Paul and St. George as the cold front begins to work its way into the northwest coast and Seward Peninsula. On Sunday, winds turn more westerly once that frontal system moves a bit more inland and weakens, and winds will come down to generally 15 to 20 knots and waves running around 5 to 6 feet area-wide. You'll see on Saturday south-southwest winds upwards to 30 knots from the Bering Strait on up through the northwest coast, with waves of 7 to 11 feet in the lower Chukchi Sea. Southwest winds 20 to 25 knots along the Arctic coast will continue to help push some of that ice out a bit. And then behind the front, winds turn more westerly on Sunday, and we'll see winds around 20 knots there, the lower Chukchi Sea, as well as along the Arctic coast. Waves 4 to 6 feet along the Arctic coast, and generally around 7 to 9 feet there in the Chukchi Sea down through the Bering Strait. And there's the weather map showing the cold front working its way through eastern Rutsch, approaching the Chukchi Sea with low pressure there just east of the Kenai in the process of weakening. And then we have a secondary low in the Gulf that's going to fling some additional rainfall into at least the southern half of the Panhandle Saturday night into Sunday. The winds will not be especially strong. The stronger winds from the southwest will be affecting the west and northwest coast on Saturday along that cold front, and as the front moves inland, it'll have a tendency to weaken with a little lighter wind setting up for the day on Sunday. So that does it for our show on this Friday the 13th. Thank you for watching, and be sure to join us over the weekend.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.